talk about the wave shaper oscillator on the Arturia MiniFreak. Let me begin by saying that I am well known on the internet for antagonizing the memory of the DX7 and those who celebrate it. This is an understandable thing because let's face it, like the introduction of the DX7, like it changed everything in the synthesis industry. And it brought about a whole bunch of sort of sad things like limited interface and digital sound for all of its purity and coolness. It really took something away, which is why in the 90s, analog came back. But anyway, if you lived through the mid 80s like I did, you have to view the FM nightmare is kind of a nightmare because you couldn't get away. Speaking of doorbells, these aren't doorbells, they're clocks, but it's timely, no pun there either. Anyway, FM, yeah, if you lived through the 80s, everything was so DX7 that we all got kind of tired of the DX7. But anyway, FM synthesis, despite it really being one oscillator antagonizing another, is a perfectly reasonable means of coming up with waveforms. And no matter what anyone tells you, it is not limited to digital. You can do FM with analog, and I don't know why people aren't now. Yeah, back in the early 70s when Shouting was doing all the stuff with Yamaha, analog oscillators are super unstable, which is the reason why we like them in analog synths. But anyway, analog oscillators today are so irritatingly stable that you can do FM with them. Anyway, the point is the FM oscillator here on the Arturia MiniFreak. Let's arrive there. Okay, it is a 2-op FM oscillator. As you might know, operators are the oscillators used in FM. They're an oscillator with, like an amp, and they're used to modulate each other, which is basically, granted, when we're doing analog, quote, analog synthesis, although there's no such thing as analog synthesis, but if we're using analog instruments to engage in synthesis, we're always using frequency modulation in the sense that the frequency of an oscillator is being modulated. And so yeah, FM is a wide-ranging thing. It's just that in an FM synth, the frequency modulation is in the audio range, which means the modulator is going way faster. It is going speeds that are within the hearing range of humans, between 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz or more. Anyway, so why the person who abhors FM more than any vintage enthusiast on the internet is teaching you about FM, I'm not sure. The same thing is true. Like I demonstrated an FM instrument for another company, and that's one of my most popular videos. I think the truth of the matter is it's not a complicated idea, and people make it seem like it is. It's just oscillators modulating oscillators. Anyway, most really cool FM synths had a lot of operators, which are FM oscillators. There's two that we're working with here, which is a good start, and it makes some very nice sounds. And the thing about FM is that when you use FM, you don't need a filter. But it's really cool that we have a filter. So like anything that you make with this FM sounds like a decent sound. And then you have the opportunity of using the filter or other oscillators with it. Well, I mean, I'm such an analog guy, I can't imagine this, but like what other synth allows you to mix like analog sounding oscillators with other like FM sounding oscillators and mix them together and put them through a filter? I mean, it's really a great concept. So let's stop messing around, Mark, and let's get to examining this oscillator. The first setting in wave is the ratio, which basically adjusts the frequency between the two oscillators that are the oscillator that is modulating the other oscillator. And you'll find that you'll want to, there are certain ratios that sound good and other ones that sound clangorous. Ones that are in like an octave or fifth range tend to sound good. The other ones sound weird. But you can apply modulation to change them from weird to good, depending on how you do it. But anyhow, this is what it sounds like. So we got to an octave, and so it sounds really normal. So you can use stuff when it's in kind of the inharmonic realms. You could use that as a monosynth thing, or a bass sound, or even a sound effect. I guess you can play harmonies too, but it gets kind of weird. Anyway, let's keep going. There's some variation in there that's interesting. Some very digital sounds. Anyway, and here we are moving through these ratios, and there's a lot of just straight timbres you can use in here. Yeah, and weirdly, God, this is really warm. Just not really the sort of jarring digital sound that you might expect, but yeah, FM can generate some really normal, even analog sounding sounds if used, applied correctly. Of course, we don't have a lot of the tools that you would need, but still, you can get some really great sounds, and then you put them through the analog filter, and pow, you've got analog sounding something that is different from the rest of the analog sounding stuff. The middle knob timbre is actually our amount, which is the amount to which one oscillator is modulated, one operator is modulating the other. There's some really strange sounds in here. If there's one thing John Chowning did a lot of things. I met him. He's a really fantastic guy. But I mean, one of the things, like, he took this, which sounds like a novelty when you first start playing with it, when you first start modulating the oscillator frequency with a audio range oscillator, you're like, this is weird crap. But he found ways to tame it and make it applicable that are really beneficial to us, as can be demonstrated by the sounds we're hearing. Some nice organ sounds. And then our last setting, which is shape, basically feeds the second operator back into itself, and it's called feedback. It just adds more harmonic content to the sound that you're making. And as per usual, once you start adding modulations to these settings, you're going to get traditional DX7 type effects. Wow, I think I just had a stroke. And that is really cool. That is really something to pursue. And there's something I should also point out, is that, remember, you have two of these FM 2-op oscillators. Well, they are oscillators. in the context of the MiniFreak, you have 2 sets of them. So if you use 2 of them to create 2 different sounds, I mean, it's kind of like, and you use them in conjunction, you basically have, in some ways, a 4-op DX7 type synth. I mean, I don't think it was. You basically have a 4-operator FM synth, and that is really cool. But yeah, it is. I am continually amazed, despite my years of antagonism towards FM, that there are really beautiful and usable sounds in here. And when I'm using the MiniFreak for synthesis, I find myself drawn back to, I'll just admit this, I'll confess it, find myself drawn back to this particular oscillator because it makes really big, chunky sounds at times. Whereas a lot of the digital sounds on here may not have, they're kind of digital sounding. This one can generate some beef, which sounds disgusting, but is really good. More filter effects without a filter. Anyway, this is the 2-op FM oscillator found on the Arturia MiniFreak.